Welcome, everybody, to our energetic self-mastery class, Etheric Abuse and Mind Control, Part 2. I hope you had enough time to process our sharing from last time. We took our time to really experience what mind control and perhaps brainwashing and etheric abuse actually feels like from within, and we've been able to answer a few questions. We had a slow pace last time to really allow us to feel this. Before we go into the energetic self-mastery, the actual realignment, reprogramming of our own inner energy, we're gonna have to deal with a few more mental, secular learning aspects here. So I want to send out a trigger warning. I should have probably done this with the first part already. Namely that this complex topic of brainwashing and mind control that we might experience in many different areas in our lives, we've already filtered this out. This can happen to us in relationships. This can happen to us in families. This can happen to us in companies. But even in academia or spiritual groups and media. So to fully internalize all of this, and we've talked about this last time already, to really become aware of our own mind's tendency to self-deceive itself, it requires a lot of time and focus. And yes, I am not even sure if we will be able to cover what it takes to really break through mind control and etheric abuse here in part 2. It also triggers a lot of our mental and emotional schisms when we try to break through this, and it can be quite spiritually disturbing, what I am sharing with you here today. It challenges our ego pretty much on all levels, but for that, it encourages you to think and feel for yourself, and hopefully empowers you to connect within and find faith again. So why am I saying this? Because we really need to understand how our own mind, our own ego is involved in mind control. And this is not to say that it's our own fault. Far from it. There is severe abuse, there is severe victimization and trauma that occurs through mind control. But there are quite a few indications here that in this day and age, we are all subjected to mind control on some level. And those of you here who come either to break through this themselves, maybe you're a truth seeker or a self-healer, or we know someone who needs help. We know someone who requires a little more awareness training, or we are questioning ourselves in regards to, our manipulation and what we apply, on other people, be it on the psychological or energetic level. So whether you're a professional or just someone who really likes this kind of training, namely the training of your own epistemology, your own truth finding, and how insights are being formed, you will be very interested here. And it won't really be hard for you to keep your focus, because this is probably the most interesting thing that you've ever heard put together, not just by me here, this is not the point, put together in this way, in a way that allows us to pierce through our own ego mind, which is extremely complex. We left off last time with the distinction between what is mind control, what is a cult. I suggested that we look into cult and cult-like behaviors because they are sort of the epitome of using mind control and brainwashing, and what is etheric abuse. And we left off with the the mechanics of mind control and which parts of us are really being deceived here, deliberately, often strategically, but sometimes also unconsciously. So I want to refer back to part 1 for these distinctions. I want to now really move deep into the summary of all mind control tactics and how they might play out in our relationships. We used this overview here that I have produced for narcissistic mind games and manipulation for people to recognize if they're in a narcissistic relationship as sort of the fundament of that. So let's summarize this here and know that you can at all times open your mic and ask questions. You can ask questions through chatting. All right, so let's move in with a faster pace here because we have a lot of material to cover. And let's summarize what these mind control tactics are that we've investigated last time. Here defined as common tactics to strategically and deliberately exploit, coerce, manipulate, control, overpower, or submit for the purpose of self-interest. And please ask, this is very important, okay? The reason why we go through this in this detail is so that we become able to identify and to discern. Love bombing is probably one of the most deceptive ways of coercing us into paying attention to something or getting mesmerized. And really what it means is that we are being sort of overwhelmingly showered with attention, with love, and for the most part, pretend interest in us. This isn't always the case, but I want you to understand that love bombing is what makes us most susceptible. Along with this, obviously, the special making. We're being felt special. You're the only one. You're the one that changes everything for me. I've never felt anything like this before, etc. Sexual projection, a very big part of mind control. Why is this? Because for most of us, this is the part of ourselves that we have less processed, that we are less whole, that we feel congruent with. Okay, so that's why this is so easy to use to get someone to pay attention to you. Data collection for collateral. This is something that you'll find especially in ways where the strategy is conscious. Okay, so what this is supposed to do is produce something like a collateral in case you want to break free. Gaslighting or blindsiding, this is something we're going to dive a little deeper into, these techniques that are being used to gaslight us. Crazy making is the same, more or less. It just happens in a slightly more extreme way. Pedal stooling often comes with love bombing. It's like putting you on a pedestal, making you really special. Then praise and slam, that's something, or praise and dump, that's something that can help you to discern this, because when we fall in love, or when we find a new job, or we are like excited and really motivated for something, when we get really sort of pulled into something, it doesn't always mean that it's mind control, and it can easily feel that we are being made special and all these things without meaning that we are being gaslit. The praise and slam is the part where you can feel this. This is like when somebody puts you up on a pedestal and then pulls the pedestal away without you being able to predict this. Double binding, very common, happening right now. It's a slightly more sophisticated way of saying that you're screwed either way, that you in some ways being put between stools. One typical thing is like, it's either you it's either me or your family, or, you know, you're going to have to decide, you know, whether you want to keep this job and be able to pay your bills, or if you conform. You know, those things are psychological double binds because they put you in a place where it's impossible to decide what's good for you. Someone who is really interested in you, who loves you, who cares for you, and this can include an employer, does not bring you into this position. To be brought into this position where you have to choose, you know, between two things that you are impossible to choose between, is already not integrous. Devaluing or degrading you in a way that is unpredictable for you, in a way that happens chronically, in a way that you constantly feel small and powerless. Simplifying and labeling, this is probably the most common form of mind control that we are not even aware of. It's this dualistic black and whiteness where, you know, things are being called simple names. It's this oversimplifying of things, you know, good or bad, our team, their team, for us or against us, where complex quantities are being so simplified that it appears that there's only all or nothing. Do you guys understand what I mean with this? We're going to come across this a few more times, but it has to do with a judgment, and it has to do with producing sort of a fixed mindset, okay? So labeling, sometimes in relationships, it can also lead or come in form of name calling, all right? Do you guys have a feel for that? What it's like when people call others or you know, in certain ways that does not feel it represents you. Do you guys feel that? We see this in social media a lot. It's like this cliche stereotyping, this putting people into certain groups, you know, like world savior, social justice warrior, you know, good doer. Those are all oversimplified labels for people who are trying to make a change. And it's not really fair to put them all into one category. So it's this stereotyping that has a lot to do with that. Normalizing abuse, this is where it gets a little more tricky here, because our sense of normal has a lot to do with our own upbringing, with our own comfort zone. And as we all know, comfort zone isn't always comfy, but what we really perceive as normal and comfortable, that can be messed with. And mind control tactics abuse that. They abuse, you know, sort of our boundaries of normal. And the way this happens is that it usually, um, you know, starts with little things and then it adds up. It's convoluted in the end, where when we look back, we don't really know anymore how it could even get there. Denial and stonewalling. That's something I'm sure all of you have come across. That's when you just sort of literally being told, I didn't say this, or people say, and then it's like as if you never said anything. When you feel the need to record conversations or have everything in writing with a person or an organization, that's typically in inner sign, an inner hunch here that that things that you say or that you try, that they're being, you know, just stonewalled, or that there is a conscious denial of that. Seeding cognitive dissonances is a little more tricky, because that has to do with our comfort zone. Most of us have schisms in us already anyway, and we're accepting this as normal. We have this like tremendous super ego and critical inner voice, and we're not even realizing when other people actually see this in us. Okay, that's something you guys need to pay a lot of attention to. Another common trait of mind control tactics is hurt or fear and rescue type of situations where you're going to, you know, being hurt, but then at the same time rescued again, or where you're being made afraid of. So a very common mind control tactic here in social media, for instance, in conjunction with the stereotyping and labeling, is to create this enemy, this external enemy. All right. And, you know, it's like you've been made afraid of, and then at the same time, you're being presented with the rescue. This can, in extreme forms, also lead to trauma bonding, you know, where someone is seriously abused, but at the same time, the abuser produces him or herself as the rescuer. And this can be in really shocking ways, okay, where you receive sort of little breadcrumbs of love or little breadcrumbs of food, and you're being made, you know, you should be happy, you should be grateful for that. It's very disturbing. Hyper criticizing, well, that's something many of you probably have experienced, where there is a constant sort of, you know, you could have done this better, or this, you know, it leads to you constantly questioning yourself. Pathological lying, also one of these very typical mental control tactics, you know, where it's linked to the pedals, to the stonewalling. It's like where you really don't understand how this, how people can get away with this, or how this can even sustain itself. It doesn't, but you know, when you are part of this, whatever organization, relationship, and you have to cope with pathological lying, it becomes really muddy. There's like very little you can do. Carrot dangling. That's something is often used in families. You know, if you good, then you get this, okay? And if you're not good, then you get disinherited. Or, you know, if you just conform, then you become the golden child. And look at all, you know, look at your brothers and sisters, how bad they are. You are my favorite. Okay, so carrot dangling often um, drives a wedge between people. It pits people against another by promising sort of special reward. Blame shifting or scapegoating. Again, here in families, very, very common. I mean, blame shifting is something that a lot of people do who are externalized, and that is to, you know, point on the outside why they couldn't do things, sort of make others responsible, or you know, where every, say, crisis or every problem that occurs somehow is being, you know, put onto your tab. You know, it's like because you didn't do this, or because you didn't pray enough, or because you didn't meditate enough, or because you didn't spend enough time, or whatever, all the way to like, it's your fault. It's your fault that I lost my job, or it's your fault that our family is experiencing this, or it's your fault that the company can't succeed. Triangulating, demonizing others, and gossiping. Again, here you see that there's fluid transitions between these things, because they often happen in combination with another. The demonizing of others goes hand in hand with the scapegoating and the labeling and the simplification of things, the stereotyping, you know. But we've had this in the last part here, where one of you asked about gossiping, and that has to do with that. You pulling other people in, and you talking about someone who's not present, or present for that matter. Triangulating in families often happens in the presence of that other person, where it would sound like, oh, mom never blah blah blah, right? And then this person looks at somebody else and, you know, sort of pulls another person in, and you feel like they're kind of teaming up against you. Isolating or separating. This again here is a transition. Flying monkeys are when you feel like other people are teaming up against you, and when there's strategically being used against you. So like you have a certain view or a certain plan, and somebody says to you, oh no, you can't do that, because others don't want that either. or if you go there, then, well, the whole company won't be happy. Or if you socialize with these people or anything in that regards, where you being told to isolate from people that you see as your support structure, so that this gradually makes you more dependent. Sabotaging, literally, I mean, any mind control technique really is a covert sabotaging technique. Okay, but sometimes it can be obvious or direct sabotaging. Virtue signaling, we talked about this last time. This is a very devious form of basically calling you on your higher goals and sort of questioning you in your ability to follow through with your higher goals, or the way you want others to see you. So like say you're a healer, or you're some kind of expert in some area, and you want to see yourself as a healer, okay, and you do something that where you violate your own boundaries, say, or your own integrity, where this is being used against you, where there's sometimes even the threat to make this public, okay, but it mostly comes in these sort of communicational forms, like, oh yeah, here you go, the greatest healer can't even heal herself, or why are you getting sick if you're such a great healer? That's virtue signaling. Infusing higher goals, a mission of some sorts, saving the world, people or planet, that is often something, and we'll see this here, especially in regards to cults, that is being used to justify certain things, okay, but also to give you a sense of purpose, to make you feel like you are not being selfish, you're doing something for the greater good, and this needs to be investigated very clearly. So basically, all mind control tactics are prying on your own mind's tendency to deceive itself. It's like a psychological con job, using your biochemistry, your brain chemistry, your neurotransmitters, your conditioning, your body, and so forth against you. So for those of you who would like to see this in context with narcissistic relationships, please look at the videos that I've produced specifically talking about this. Any questions so far? Are you with me? Okay, okay, thank you, Amanda. Yes, okay. Okay, sometimes when I go into this lecture mode, and this happens a lot with the energetic self-mastery classes, I just need to check in with you. Please don't feel like you distracting me or anything if you ask questions. They help me actually to see where you're at. So let's dive a little deeper into specifics of gaslighting tactics. Gaslighting describes common covert predatory tactics to strategically and deliberately implanting self-doubt, self-deception, cognitive dissonances, and toxic passivity in a person or group of persons. Okay, so this is one of the hallmarks of mind control, is using these gaslighting tactics. And how does this happen? Okay, so the first, and I've tried to create a bit of an order here also in the intensity. Okay, so like the priorities in which you have to investigate things. The first hallmark of gaslighting, be it in a relationship, be it through media, be it in a company or in a family, or just overall, sort of with collective programming here, is a constant roller coaster, is constant stress and constant distraction. Constantly. You constantly, you're being driven into this constant place of of adrenal fatigue, so to speak. And this can, of course, take on different forms, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and energetically. But overall, it's this constant up and down, this constant stress. Then another hallmark is the disproportionate reactivity or impulsivity, like this overreaction to everything. And I'm not talking you, I'm talking the people around you. It makes you sort of feel you're not safe. You have to walk on eggshells. You have to tiptoe around either certain people or, entire groups of people. In relationships and families, very common gaslighting tactic is emotional rage beasting and perhaps even physical intimidation. That's something that really stresses your body and your brain chemistry and conditions you to not do anything. It conditions you to become more passive. Okay, even if it's just sort of this walking out of, rage quitting conversations every time it gets a little trickier. Okay, it makes you feel you have to surrender in some ways. Rescuer, fixer, or fake support type of dependency. So this is where somebody like makes themselves so indispensable for you that you feel like without them you wouldn't be able to do anything. Now, obviously, we have times in our lives where someone becomes, someone who helps us with things. So that's not the same. This is more like a fake support. It's like you feel this like total dependency on this person, and he or she or the company is the only one that can get you out of there. Next is frequent labeling. We talked about this in regards to the stereotyping and judging. It's very superficial. That's how you can tell if someone is gaslighting you, because it has no depth. It really is just sort of throwing words or labels around. Then, when you've been promised shortcuts or quick fixes, it's such a temptation for our ego. All right, that's why these like get rich overnight or lose 10 pounds in a weekend are still selling. Okay, it's our ego's tendency to deceive itself, but it's a form of gaslighting. Faking empathy, very, very common in narcissistic relationships. Narcissists, per definition, are not able to feel empathy, but they'll pretend. They will emulate emotions, or they'll sort of cognitively in their minds anticipate what somebody would say or do in that situation. But deep down, you can feel it's sort of fake. It doesn't match up. Okay, it doesn't match up with all the other activities. One of my pet peeves, faking spirituality or purpose for that matter. You find that in a lot of the social justice organizations nowadays. But faking spirituality, the reason why this is on this list here is because spirituality cannot be proven. It's not fact-based. And that's why it's such a beautiful thing for a manipulator or mind controller to use. All right. It's not, you can't question it. You can't, prove anything. Faking superiority or authority. Another one, when someone or some organization claims this like extraordinary authority over something, or being the best in everything or the only in everything. Okay, this is how you can discern this. At the same time, minimizing or oversimplifying complex subjects, telling you, oh, this is too complex for you to understand, or this is too hard to put into words, or you just don't grasp it, or the human mind is not able to grasp this. Those are very tricky ways of making you, you know, bite or buy into like really superficial platitudes. So never here, this is a pet peeve of mine, never be afraid of asking questions. Okay, when somebody says to you, oh, this is too complex for you to understand, or you wouldn't know, or whatever, always ask this. You immediately have to counteract that. Constant narrative, alternative reality, or disinformation. Probably the most prevalent gaslighting tactic that we all experience here through media and social media. But it happens in families, it happens in relationships, and in companies as well. Devaluing emotions in general and gut feelings as like irrationality, you know, where you're being downplayed, where your gut feeling, or where, you know, you having emotions or having feelings is being called emotional or rational, where you start feeling bad about having emotions in the first place, or where the human nature, you know, as you know, having emotions is being criticized. Manipulating environment, this is also a very cool gaslighting tool, because you know it sort of reduces your options. You know, you're starting to you know, only see what you can see, or what is controlled for you to see. Objectifying and game playing, this is something you can often observe when they talk about other people. You probably won't be able to identify this when you are part of being objectified or played with, but you can tell by the way people talk about others if they see them actually as persons, or more like sort of pawns in a chess game. Enmeshing, co-conspiring, and shared secret. Enmeshment is something, you know, where when you get so deep into the relationship or families, in families there's always enmeshment, but when there really isn't anything that you can decide on by yourself anymore, there always is a consequence for somebody else. It's very enmeshed. Okay, and a lot of times gaslighters will use sort of a co-conspiring type of thing that they hold over you, um, like a shared secret. In narcissistic family structures, for instance, it's very common to have severe, you know, secrecy, not just towards other families. So, you know, what would the neighbors think, or, you know, nobody on the outside is, you know, supposed to know this, but often also amongst the members or within the relationship. And sometimes the shared secret is used to manipulate you into keeping quiet over something. And of course, this then becomes even more severe if there is some kind of collateral where you're being almost blackmailed, you know, into not saying anything, because if you would, since everything is so enmeshed, your whole entire structure would fall apart. Narrowing your options and escape routes. That's obviously, again, here there's transitions. It's a realm. Okay, this is part of you know, us feeling we don't have any other choice, because the options that you see are either too black or white, or you know, they would produce a lot of damage or financial loss or anything along those lines. Hiding, secrecy, and cover-ups as just a normal way of being. This is very, very common when you're gaslit, that you don't even realize how everything kind of has this endless narrative and constant secrecy and hiding. Ritualizing also is used as a gaslighting tactic in families in a very simple way. Well, this is the way our family does things, or this is how we've always done things. And if you don't, then you are bad, you know, then you belong to the bad guys, something like this. Now, a sneakier form of that is sentimentalizing. That's, you know, where in a relationship where you have this cool thing that you guys do together, and whenever you do this, you just feel so loved and so connected, okay, and this is sort of over exaggerated, okay, through rituals. And this is then, as we will see here, often used against you when you want to leave, okay, like, you know, reminding you of this, you know, beautiful ritual that you had to do, your song or your dance, or, you know, certain activities that you used to do. They're being over sentimentalized. Obviously, idolizing is also a part of gaslighting. Works with everyone. We do it with ourselves. You know, putting our relationship or what we have or what we've built together on this like pedestal. It's a fantasy bond, and you know, eventually, because we're believing in this ideal more than what actually is. So, the more things are being idolized, the more suspicious you should become, because there is a tendency of your mind to just look at the ideal rather than the reality. Guilt tripping and shaming, unfortunately, uh, you know, big part of gaslighting, and probably the most impactful for all of us. Namely, you know, to play on our shame, to play on our guilt. And if you are energetically sensitive, if you are empathic, you already come in with a huge sort of pit here, you know, of feeling responsible and feeling guilt, and that is shamelessly being abused with gaslighting tactics. Obviously, it can also be a little more direct in form of blackmailing or threatening, literally, you know, sort of threatening you with public humiliation. People have this a lot with social media nowadays, all the way to harassing. Okay, be it harass calling, harass texting, harassing you in social media, hoovering when you want to get out, and constantly bombarding not just an individual when we try to leave a relationship, but a whole entire family or a company, or obviously a group such as a cult or something can be part of this. So here's a question that Annette is asking again, and I like that you asked this, Annette, because this is the third reason why we want to educate ourselves about all this. What if we are unknowingly part of this? What if we are gaslighting others and we're not aware of it? Well, the truth to be told, Annette, is gaslighting is something that we all do. And the more we do it with ourselves, the more unconsciously we do it with others. That's a simple but complex answer. So, you know, if you're feeling guilt or shame about this right now, I can assure you that this is something we all do. And all the more a reason why we want to educate ourselves in this detail. Because we don't want to do this. We don't want to manipulate people, but we do. It's part of our human nature. We manipulate people all the time, be it through emotions, through words, through behaviors, all the time. So when we look at these tactics, okay, it's important to remember the intention behind it, okay? So we are looking at the extremes here, you know, coming from a predatory, an exploitative point of view to strategically and deliberately doing this to other people. Anything we do unconsciously, you know, is still something we need to look at, but would, you know, belong into the category of projecting and absorbing. That's why this is also a part of that. So again, here there's a video that you can watch that goes through this with other details. Now, then comes the next aspect, and that is what happens if you signal or indicate that you want to leave, or if you have left. Then there is another mind control version that applies. It's called hoovering, okay? Hoovering as being sucked back in. And this is very common, even more covert, really, because here we often don't just find psychological, but very heavy etheric manipulation, which leads us to etheric abuse. It prevents a person from breaking free from control, abuse, or toxic relationships, financial exploitation, or cult-like organizations. So again, these tactics, they all are similar, but they can find different expressions. Okay, so for example, ignoring and pretending that you want to leave is like, stonewalling. Okay, but this happens quite frequently, where you express your concerns and you say, like, this isn't working for me and I want to leave, and people just pretend you never said it, minimizing your concerns and calling it like a temporary episode, or you just overreacting, or you're irrational, or you're emotional. There's a minimization going on, a devaluing of your concerns, all the way to crazy making. Oh, you're just making this up. Oh no, I was just joking. I didn't mean it that way. Punishment through disinterest or pretending you don't exist. This is so sneaky, because especially when there was love bombing in place in the beginning of the relationship, or you entering a group or company or whatever, one of the most effective ways to pull you back in is to actually ignore you, to punish you, and pretend you're not there. So narcissists will often do this, especially in narcissistic families. We see this, where for some time, for as long as you conform, you like being pedestaled and you're being treated like the golden child. And the moment you do something that doesn't conform, you just don't exist. Self-destruct drama, or threatening that you will be responsible if anything bad happens. Self-destruct drama is like when someone in a relationship, for instance, threatens you with suicide, or that their entire world is going to be shattered and that you are responsible, that it will be on your tab. It's a form of blame shifting, but it scares us, right? Because then all of a sudden we realize, oh, the enmeshment, we're being triangulated, we're being double bound. You see, this is like a cascade, okay, that then sort of breaks or falls over us, and we're like, oh, and then we don't have the energy to break through it anymore. Faking concern and sympathy, that's very common with especially covert or vulnerable narcissists, where they all of the sudden spend so much more attention to you. You just told them that you want to leave, or that you're done, or that you want to get divorced, and all of the sudden they're like, are you okay? I wanted to contact you just to see if you were okay, or like this sort of seemingly selfless sympathy. You see this a lot with third-party people that all of a sudden appear in your life, okay, that treated you like shit before, and then all of a sudden, you are being made special again through this fake concern or sympathy. Bombardment, very, very common nowadays, especially through texting. But it can also happen through other things. It can happen through, social media. It can happen through third-party people. Pretend apology or promising everything will be better. And, for people who are a little bit codependent, this is usually why they stay in toxic relationships for years or decades. It's like once you finally get to that point where you want to leave, all of a sudden you see this personality shift in your partner, and then they admit to everything. They, beg for your forgiveness and promise you everything. And this happens over and over and over again, and nothing ever happens. Nothing ever changes. Fantasy flipping, nostalgia and recalling the glorious past. Oh my God, this is so predictable. You leave a narcissist, and the next thing you know, they're going to call you and talk about the good old times and how they miss you and how they miss the feeling of laying next to you. And they send you pictures from vacations that you took together and wonderful moments. Okay, so they're playing a tape, they're implanting a flashback in you that where you go back into this moment of excellence and don't even remember what your problem was. Random attention, gifts and red herrings. Okay, this is when the person that you're with or the organization kind of like treats you with neglect, and then the moment you say you want to leave, all of a sudden you get this attention, all of a sudden you get sent flowers, or you get invited to go to things that you've always wanted to but never really got to, or nobody ever even thought about doing something for you, and then all of a sudden you get all these red herrings. Idealizing the relationship. This is something that I find especially prevalent in the spiritual groupings here. Making the relationship so special that it can't even be broken. You can't even leave because we have a soul contract. We're twin souls. It's forever and ever. Very, very dangerous. This produces a lot of damage in people, not just emotionally, physically, financially, and all, but spiritually and etherically. It's very, very dangerous. Making you feel special. Yes, of course, this is a big part of all hoovering techniques, to suddenly make you feel special again. And if we look at the more energetic stuff here, then one of the ways people or organizations can hoover you back in is by you suddenly feeling their energetic presence, or maybe even feeling watched. It almost creates sort of the paranoia in you. But at the same time, if you have a hard time leaving, it also pulls you into the relapse. It makes you remember what it felt like, and you feel like, oh, they're still loving me that much, and maybe I was too harsh, and it makes you question yourself. A mental and energetic projection of past times. I've talked about this already. It's the implanting the glorious times, the flashbacks. But this can also happen in the energetic, by sending you sort of mental pictures of what it could have been like, or what it could be like, or what it was like. This can happen through talking, but also just through energies. Okay, and we'll talk about this here in a minute, how you can feel that. Reminding you of good old times whilst degrading or ignoring your pain, like as if any of the things that you've lost, or that the pain that you've gone through doesn't mean anything. Energetically binding you. This is here also more of a energetic technique that leads to etheric abuse. Reminding you that you took vows or oaths, or that you made promises. And you can sometimes feel, especially when it comes to this sort of twin soul thing, where you are violating your own soul. This can be very, very deep and requires a lot of clearing. Pulling in others or gaining information about you. This is one of the things that personally I've experienced a lot when I, in the case of divorce, or when I left a partner that I was with for a long time, that all of a sudden they call my family and they're inquiring about how I'm doing. And so, or friends, trying to get information about me. Okay, and then using that against me, or making me feel like they're watching me. And then, of course, these people are being used to triangulate it. They're being used as flying monkeys. So they come to me and tell me, hey, did you know he called me and told me blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. Okay, those are all things that are not controllable for you and very disturbing. Fake crisis or needing your help, misusing your empathy. Yeah, this is also something that is often used as hoovering technique, especially with empaths or codependents, to use your goodness against you. Okay, so all of a sudden they need this info from you. You're the only one that can give them that info. And that's why they needed to text you or call you, or they need your help because you're the only one that can solve this for them or whatever. Especially if you've always done it for them, you'll be really, really susceptible to this. Sensualizing and sexual projection through text streams and imagery. Very, very common, guys, more common than you think. And when I say sensualizing, it's not always sexual. It can also just invoke sort of tactile memory in you, body memory. Okay, either through text, but also etherically in dreams and constant pictures that you see. And even though you are decided that you want to leave, you constantly get these flashbacks. This can be done energetically. Smear campaigning, blackmailing, virtue signaling, and public humiliation. We talked about this. They can hoover a person back in. And last but not least, obviously, fake accusations to solicit defensive reactions or lashing out, to make you having to defend yourself in public and to appear like the crazy one, or to appear as the one that caused all the problem, or to make you look like you were the narcissist or you were the person that produced the problem in the first place. Yeah, so you see that there is quite a bit here if we dive a little deeper. And let me remind you, this is very important, that falling for mind control has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with intelligence. Mind control prides on your ego mind's perception and susceptibility for self-deception, which cannot be detected by the mind itself. You cannot, when you're in your ego, you cannot identify, you cannot detect that you're being mind controlled. So this is the bad news, okay? It's that we all have an ego and we all have ego perception, we all have a mind, and we all fall for these traps with ourselves all the time, which is why we need to remind ourselves how our perception is formed in the first place. What we perceive depends on what we choose to focus on, where our energy goes, what we recognize, how we draw conclusions, how we judge what we perceive, and how we choose to respond about what we perceive, how we choose to feel about it, how we choose to attach to it, how we choose to take it. And all that depends or is determined by our frame of reference. And there was another workshop that I did a while back about a perception and emotional processing that goes really deep into this. Here, I just want to point out things that we've talked about in the delusion and self-mastery class last month. Cognitive perception process, how this works, okay? And you don't have to really go through this here. This is too mental, but this is how it works, guys. This is how we come to conclusions. And there's several layers of this. The first perception process in us has to do, I mean, it happens within 10,000ths of a second, but to really, form an opinion takes 1.5 seconds, and then to attach to it and to have this, like, decide how we respond to it, it's like about 6 seconds. But these are the stages of it. It's determined by the focus and choice of what we pay attention to. It's determined by how we analyze and how we recognize patterns and how we draw conclusions. And all that depends on our frame of reference. And that reference, basically what we feel as normal or what we feel as comfort zone, is determined by proximity. In other words, what we're used to, and how we define normal. Okay, similarities, what we perceive as comfort zone, is something that we perceive as reconfirming what we find, what we like. Okay, literally. And then the differences, you know, where we come to the conclusion that we dislike or like it, that we, you know, antipathy and sympathy. And that then leads to the attachment, to the reactivity, namely whether we seek pleasure or avoid pain, this paradigm of our ego dualism, to cope with it. So the mechanics of perception that are being used against us, okay, how our reference programs for the, you know, of our cognitive perception, how they're being corrupted through mind control, is through exposure and repetition, through confirmation bias, basically just feeding ourselves with the same information and the same conclusion over and over again, and through producing lots of cognitive dissonances in us, constantly triggering our inner schisms, our inner split, our inner incongruence, constantly making ourselves question ourselves, our own perception. And then the stages of higher perception, you know, basically the process of coming to an insight and tapping into our own consciousness, the epistemology of insight finding, okay, from ego perception to consciousness, which happens through discernment, okay, is in these steps here. It's very theoretical, guys. This is the science of how consciousness works, okay. It goes from just purely experiencing something and, you know, reactivity, to self-observing, to witnessing, and then you know, we enter the place where we can truly be neutral and objective, because anything below truth, before we actually become able to identify truth, is, you know, irrational and subjective, but without us realizing it. And this can then lead to more clarity, and we also recognize that we have a choice. That this is when we discover our inner power, and it leads us to trusting ourselves in our inner power, and then inner peace, a stillness. We become less susceptible to mind control because we rely on our inner knowing. So one last checklist here, guys, for you, as in, actually no, this is the first checklist, but the last mental thing before we go into the energetic alignment here in a few minutes. Red flags. Okay, I'm going to lead you through checklists for how to identify if you are part of narcissistic abuse, if you're in a toxic relationship with someone or family. Then I'm going to go through checklists here if you are a part of a cult, or if you're being pulled into a cult. And then last but not least, a checklist, how to detect that you're a victim of Esteric Abuse, or, you know, whatever your participation in that is. You guys still good? It's a lot of material, it's a lot of wording, it's a lot of lingo, I know. These are all things that you can read up on, that you can do research on. This self-mastery class is here for you to develop your own self-healing strategy, guys, which means that these aren't things that I just tell you. You're not supposed to just take my say-so. I really want you to form your own opinion and your own insights. Thank you, Julian. Yes, feedback is really important for me, because I do understand the limitations of our attention span, and I do know that this can be sort of monotone when I talk about these things, but this is all material that we have to cover. And that's why the self-mastery classes are not part of the regular curriculum here, because this is only for people who really want to learn this. So, checklist, red flags, whether you're part or a victim of narcissistic abuse or in a narcissistic relationship. First of all, ask yourself, do you feel love bombed? Do you feel elevated and then dumped the next moment? Is there a constant sort of push or pull that you feel? Really, really good question. Whether it's strategic or deliberate, it's not healthy. Do you feel safe enough to express yourself? Again, we find this in non-narcissistic or non-toxic relationships as well. But you have to understand that a combination of many of these things lead to you not being able to detect your own self-deceit. So you have to ask yourself these questions on a regular basis if you are not sure. So can you express yourself? Are you safe enough to speak your truth? Can you maintain your own timing and space? Very important, especially in the beginning of a relationship. When things move too fast. So one of the hallmarks of narcissistic relationships or narcissistic control is to push you, to make things go really, really fast. Narcissistic relationships often start with extremely fast pace. Like you meet once and then 3 weeks later, she moves in. Okay, there is a mismatch. Okay, because that might not be your timing. You might need more time to feel this out. Often also in conjunction with sexual interaction. Okay, so if you feel pushed, okay, or if you feel invaded in your space too fast, too quick, too deep, okay, that's a red flag. Is this really about me? Oh, good question, but hard to answer if you're caught in your own specialness or if you are being triggered in your specialness. Of course, and you want it to be about you, but is it really about you? I'm often confused. Do I question myself, my love? Okay, or should I question the whole setting here? Why am I confused? Okay, being confused is not healthy. So any person who cares for you or loves you does not want you to be confused, does not want you to assume. A person who cares for you makes sure that there's clarity. So if you find yourself in a place where you constantly question yourself or your love, well, just as a discipline, you should turn this around and express your concern that you feel constantly confused or not sure if the other person loves you. It's not normal, guys, to constantly question whether the other person loves you. And it's not healthy. Are my concerns being taken seriously? Is there a follow-up? Yeah, let's say you have the courage to say something, but are they actually responding to it? Or are they just denigrating and just saying, oh no, you're just making this all up. Look at me, I'm here. This is proof enough that I love you. No, it's not. Love is not defined by just physically being present. And is there a follow-up? Is there a possibility for you to talk about this after a certain amount of time and say, hey, look, I talked to you about this a while back and I still feel that way? Or is it just being brushed off as you being emotional or having an episode? Am I in a constant state of stress or exhaustion? It's not normal, guys. Okay, let me just spell it out that way. Now, if you have stuff going on at your work, say, then it's very common to take this home and then you're unable to distinguish whether it's a relationship or the work. A lot of us who are in toxic relationships are also in toxic work situations, and it's basically sort of the replication of it. And you're so used to being constantly stressed out, overworked and underloved that you don't even realize it. Is there pedestaling or idealization going on? Is there some of that twin soul stuff? And I'm not saying that this doesn't exist. Okay, don't get me wrong here, but it requires a very sophisticated and a trained awareness, energy awareness of someone to actually see something like that. But is there pedestaaling? Is there an idealization? Is the relationship or are you being sort of put above any other, whatever relationships? Is there any kind of energetic infringement? Any kind of energetic infringement, even if it's a loving one? In relationships between two energetically sensitives or even trained energy aware people, okay, this needs to be part of the discipline to not energetically infringe. This needs to be talked about. It's not okay to constantly have this other person's energy in your field while you're sleeping, you know, when you're at work and so forth. It's not okay. That's not love. Is the other really interested in your views, your values, you know, friends and family? Are they really interested? Or have you been together with them for like 2, 3 years and they never even made an effort, you know, to actually see your family or, you know, talk to you about your opinions or, you know, have they ever made anything about you? Or is it all about them and their friends and their environment and their stuff? A lot of times in combination with all the stress, you know, there really is not much time left, you know, to think about your own views, your own values, your own friends and family, because you're so busy, you know, just responding and reacting and coping with the constant stress that all this seems, you know, of little priority to you. But that's part of abuse, guys. Is there verbal, emotional, or energetic abuse? Any kind. Any kind. Is there name calling? Is there labeling? Is there demeaning? Is degradation? Any kind of any kind. That's a red flag right there. It's not integrous, guys. And even if you say don't experience this yourself, but you know, if this person that you're with or the, you know, boss that you have does that to other people, it's not okay, no matter how you twist or turn it. Do you constantly question your reality? We talked about this before. This is, of course, also very common amongst energetically sensitives to question reality. Well, if you constantly question your reality, if you really don't know what you're feeling, what you're experiencing, what you're perceiving, whether it's true or not, it's a red flag. You got to stop. Okay, whatever it is that you're doing isn't working. Okay, you need to focus on yourself and take more time, perhaps, to self-reflect, to be more with yourself so that you don't have to question your reality. Do you frequently feel stonewalled, ignored, or punished? Are your boundaries frequently ignored? And you know, let me tell you, in most toxic relationships or when there's a narcissistic abuse present, it happens with little things here and there. First, it's just like a tiny little thing where your boundary is being overstepped and you get love bombed for it. Okay, so you're like, okay, it's not that bad, you know, after all, it made me feel good. So this is how, you know, this punishment and reward, how it utilizes your brain chemistry, your neurotransmitters to condition yourself against your own needs, against your own values. Is very, very important to understand. Do you have to cope or compensate a lot? Do you have to actually lie, perhaps, for the sake of your partner or relationship? You know, do you feel like you can't tell other people what is going on because part of you feels ashamed about it? Or, you know, about the stuff that he does or she does? Are there dependencies between you and the other? A red flag. Yes, of course, when we are married, when we have children together, when we have, or when we work together, a partnership of economic sorts or whatever, yeah, there is a dependency, but is this just you being dependent on them? Or is it just them dependent on you working, you bringing in the money? It's a red flag. Is there a shared secret? Are you being silently made complicit in something? Huge red flag. You might feel, your ego might feel stroked a little bit if you are the only one who knows a secret. But let me tell you, in a lot of times when there's a narcissistic abuse present, you are strategically being pulled into something like a secret. Could be like anything simple, like tax evasion, okay, or breaking laws, tiny things here and there, or bigger things, things that happened in the past that are not okay. Do you frequently feel guilty or shamed, or just feel shameful? It's a red flag. You shouldn't feel that way in a healthy relationship. It's not a good foundation for a loving and lasting relationship. Does the other make you feel you are not good enough? Do you constantly think that you have to try harder, you have to do more? You know, you put on 5 pounds, oh my God, he's not going to love me anymore. Or you're not bringing home enough money, oh my God, she's not going to love me anymore. This is the seeding of cognitive dissonances, okay? And this often comes to us in form of not feeling good enough. Do you feel responsible for everything? And actually act that way. You take responsibility for everything. This is then where, you know, it crosses over into codependency. Codependency also being a covert form of manipulation, but with a different goal, not for the exploitation of the other person. It's more of a twisted form of self-confirmation through exploiting oneself. It's like a self-destruct. Is your life's purpose tied to the other, or the company, or the organization, or the family? Like literally, like if you would leave, then, you know, everything that you ever stood for would be gone. That's a red flag. If this can happen in healthy relationships, but then you have to consciously work on balancing this. Okay, a lot of these things can all happen in non-narcissistic relationships, but you need to watch out for them, because if you don't reflect, then they will create dependency, they will create gaslighting and you know, exploitation possibly, or even abuse. Or there are others that reinforce, infringe, or enmesh. That's always a good indication here that this person has been doing this for a long time, and you might not be the first one. Does he or she have like a whole group of people that do that too, that are somehow creating this collective ego that this is the way we do this? You see this a lot in spiritual groups. Is there gaslighting or crazy making that you can identify? This checklist is for you to become more aware. It's obviously a complex combination of many of these things, but if they compound in your relationship or at work, you need to do something. Okay, so we're going to talk about what we can do here in a little bit. Again, there is a video that you can watch on YouTube that I've produced that allows you to go a little deeper into this. So now I would like to switch your attention to the more energetic and feeling part of this energetic self-mastery class. It's like shifting gears, the energetic alignment process that we do. And I renamed it. Originally, I named it immunity, but I really wanted to point out what this alignment is really aligning you towards, and that is reclaiming your power. So for the next 14 minutes, 15 minutes, we're going to listen to the energy alignment. I need one of you to give me the feedback if it is actually playing. So if you could please let me know. Forgot to load the energy MP3, the energy alignment MP3. You just received this a few minutes before we started in your email. Okay, so I sent this out because I don't, so briefly before session, because I don't really want you to do the alignment before the session. I want you to do it during the session the first time. And, you know, listening to the energy alignment is only half of the job. It's really about you tuning into the words and perhaps reading this out loud. So with the instructions, you also have the music without words. You can read this out loud to yourself. If you are in a place where you need to reclaim your power for whatever reason, then I suggest that you speak the words yourself. But for now, here, just for showing, how we can influence the way we feel about things, the way we process things, and also the way we understand things, I want to demonstrate really the gear shift that can happen.
Reclaiming my power. Due to the power of alignment to my heart and the recognition of divinity radiating through me as a true self, I reclaim the right to be me, to feel alive, to feel safe, to be happy, and to be loved. Where there is energy, there is life. Where there is life, there is light. Where there is love, there is life. Where there is no love, no light, and no life, there is no truth. When I fear I cannot exist on my own, when I fear that my light is not enough, when I lost the connection to my heart, when I lost the connection to my body, when I don't really know who I truly am, I cannot trust in my perception. When I lost connection to my inner light, I can no longer tell what separates me from the source of my own existence, and thus what separates me from truth. When I am stuck in my own beliefs, my mind, and my ego reality, I can no longer tell if what I am perceiving, feeling, sensing, or experiencing is true. When I'm overwhelmed by my fear of loss, when I'm lost and shut down my feelings, I can no longer tell my needs, my boundaries, or my values. I can no longer know if I am true. Or when I am too focused on external energies, people, or places, when I'm making external triggers, sensations, emotions, and energies more important than feeling my own light, I can no longer feel my own light. And when I cannot feel my own light, I might seek other people's light or fall for their projections, which is why I cannot discern. To break through this cycle of externalizing my power, to freely choose, control, and regulate me, to meet my own needs, and to stand up for my integrity, when I no longer feel the right to free will, I need to step up and stop whatever I'm perceiving and check if my reality and with it my inner light is broken or intact. In me is the eternal spark of divine light. For as long as I remember that, I can illuminate the untruth of perception and all self-deception. I can call on my heart to show me my own light so that I can feel the difference between true perception and deception. I am in charge of my own consciousness, my own insights, and my own conclusions. And I only want truth. I am not settling for less. I herewith relinquish everything that is holding me back from fearlessly enjoying my life. Everything that squashes my courage to be me or tries to extinguish my inner light. I renounce whatever needs to be let go of to feel the presence of my own light, my own love, and what connects me with the source of light within. Remembering divine light as the one and only source of truth, I realize now only I command my space, my energy, my body, my emotions, thoughts, and most importantly, my light, here and now and at all times. Anything not originating from my inner light has no power over me. Anything not originating from the source of all life is not true. It cannot show me truth. It cannot make me feel love, and it cannot heal me. I acknowledge that this journey can be beautiful, painful, and frightening at times. Yes, sometimes I will feel confused. Sometimes I will feel sad. Sometimes I will feel lonely. Sometimes I will feel afraid. Sometimes I will feel guilty. And sometimes I will feel angry. And sometimes I will feel superior. And again, sometimes I simply need to admit that to myself, that I cannot know what I don't know. I admit to myself that I have self-deceptive beliefs that sometimes control my perceptions. To learn how to better know the difference, all I need is the courage to face and deal with all my feelings, sensations, thoughts, and emotions, especially those that I don't want to feel, as they are showing me the truth of the invisible beliefs that are secretly controlling my perception and reality. My inner light can show me this. It shows me that my being is eternal and infinite, and that darkness is just a temporary state of energy that I can change. My life also shows me the power and truth of my own existence in the now. For as long as I can connect with the truth of my own existence through my heart, my light is untouchable. I know my light. I love the light. I am light. It permeates through me with the truth and life force of my own existence. Because I exist, I do not need to be afraid of the delusions of my ego. It is above my ego. Experiencing darkness within is merely a way of learning how to better connect with truth, and with it, to reclaim my inner power. I can see now. My ego is part of my existence, and so is the temptation of darkness and illusion, that my existence is bound to this body, mind, and emotion. By recognizing the highest expression of that which I am, I align myself to my soul's sovereignty as my reality. I fully embrace the divine light that exists through my consciousness, and let go of trying to control or avoid the future I cannot control. I accept that my ego is the source of all fear and self-deception, but that there really is nothing to fear. What I experience as fear of loss is nothing but the delusion of darkness, manifested as a physical, emotional, and mental reaction to losing myself. But I cannot lose myself. To overcome this fear of inner confusion and broken reality, I choose now to let go of my ego's temptation and needing external power. Instead, I consciously focus on breathing in divine light through my heart, connecting with the divine consciousness permeating through me, and filling myself with my own light. With every breath in, I embrace witnessing my ego's notion as a momentary fluctuation of my energy, showing me where I need to go within and focus on my inner light. And then, with every breath out, as I calm my body, allow my emotions, clear my thoughts, and surrender all worries, I can release all fear and doubt in me and give myself permission to feel alive, loved, and safe again. The power of my inner light is defined by the truth of my own creation. Anything not in alignment with loving myself feeds the illusion of separation from myself, and thus the temptation of ego and self-deception in me. Every broken reality I face and thus let go in this way clears, connects, and empowers me, and reclaims truth, light, love, and abundance in me. Through trusting in this power of consciousness, I honor my sacred self journey, and thus receive the power to make myself feel safe and protected. Out of my love for the divine, I surrender all that I am afraid of and that is holding me back from manifesting and enjoying my life as the highest expression of my true self. I herewith absolve myself from all judgment, self-deception, and error perception, from all fear of separation and broken reality, experienced or caused in any dimension or time. And I devote myself to the joy of experiencing my divine inner light, which is providing me with all protection, provision, learning, and healing I need to thrive and beyond. Thank you. Slowly coming back. How are you guys feeling?
Would anybody like to share? It's very timely right now, reclaiming our power in the midst of all this insanity that is going on outside of us. Seems like a very good technique to inoculate ourselves from outer bombardment in general. Who would like to share?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, awesome.
You know, it was a really good process. I could feel the process. I guess I don't have much to share, just that I could really feel the unfolding of the process, step by step. So it was more easy to step out of my mind and let the process kind of unfold and let the energy do what the energy does, right? It wasn't. It was a lot.
I know, especially for someone who has been in that place.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I have been in that place. Yeah, Juliet, I agree with you. It's perfect timing. Like today, like literally today. I was considering to just make it public. I might, because it's, I mean, I don't have that big of an audience, unfortunately. Even if I share these beautiful alignments, nobody really shares them. So that's my frustration sometimes. But yeah, it goes really, really deep. And it's this, that's why I picked those two pictures here. It's about really tapping into that self-understanding, okay, that yes, we have to be a warrior. We have to really pierce through that with the sword of truth, and that needs to come from within ourselves. But we cannot forget about our heart, because our heart is the part of us that gives us the power to do that. So it's both at the same time. It's like being a warrior, but also being in that inner peace. When it comes to reclaiming our power, it all comes down to that one part, and that is that we realize that war, destruction, fighting is not normal. That's not our natural state, because it creates imbalance. So the biggest, the most important part about discernment is to realize that it's not okay, that it's not healthy to be in this constant state of fighting and defending and fear and walking on eggshells and whatnot, questioning ourselves. Not to say that there aren't things that we need to reflect on, that there aren't things, our own shadow, our own darkness, our own temptations, and so forth. This is not the point. We all have them. But for as long as we allow ourselves to be pulled into this dissonance, into this coercive persuasion, okay, that's what it's called in an academic sense. We are susceptible to all kinds of shit. And for the most part, really irrational shit. Really dumb shit. Forgive me my English here. It's a function of our mind. It cannot detect errors in itself. And that's why believing in our mind as sort of the authority of being is very immature. It's very childish. It's infantile to believe that. It's part of us, yes, and our ego is part of us, and our body is part of us, and our emotions are part of us. And yes, we have to work on constant balance. It takes effort. Yes, it's not for lazy people. But that's the only way for us to be in our power. And power not as in overpowering others or anything like that. No, as in realizing what it is that we are, that we want to experience this life as, that even including our likes and dislikes, who we want to show up as, what our values are, what's important to us, what defines us. And to recognize that we have a free will here, the biggest gift of all. The one thing that distinguishes us from animals, say. We're not just better animals. No, that's the scientific, the Newtonian view of making us believe that we are just sort of like a further evolved version of sentient life on this planet. It's not true. And yet it is, obviously, from a scientific point of view. There is a sort of, we can see that there is a development there, an evolution there. So evolution is true. Okay, but there is something else in us. And that something, we can also find this in other sentient life, depending on their evolutionary ladder. But there still is one distinct difference, and that is that we have our own soul. We do not have a group soul like animals, even the higher developed animals. We have a soul sovereignty. We have a sacred self. And that's what this MP3 is supposed to reawaken in us. Recognizing that we have the power no matter what the situation is, guys. So the fact that this mind control and coercive persuasion has become so normal for us that we can no longer recognize it, is fucked up. It's supposed to break us down, it's supposed to break people down and make itself sort of the center of attention, okay, and then program us in that broken, imbalanced state. And then, by creating sort of this hive mind around it and controlling the environment, especially now with the social media, what we didn't have before 10, 15 years ago, it's all normalized and reinforced. And that's why more than ever, we are forced literally to learn these discernment ways. We need to learn that the confrontation with untruth is what bumps us up in our consciousness development, in our evolution. It's what shows us what we truly are. And so it's not a plague or apocalypse or the end of everything. No, it is the precipice of a whole new level of consciousness collectively. And everyone who can feel this inside of them, regardless of how difficult it is for you at this very moment to break through some of these outer conditions, this controlled environment and all this stuff that you're being bombarded with, no matter how deep you are in that rabbit hole, you can choose and you have the power to break free from this. And yes, it's not comfortable, but your comfort zone, your uncomfy comfort zone, is what got you there in the first place. Yes, the stuff that's in the way. And we have to decide, we have to choose to get that out of the way. And if we don't choose this, then we're going to be subjected to the matrix programming. So the way to break through this is to recognize that we have the power. Most people don't know that they have the power. And they're being, with surgical precision, programmed to believe that they don't have the power. So coming back to us as healers and self-healers, if we know someone or if you have a client or if it's ourselves that we want to help in these kind of situations, we got to understand that the only way to do this is to first and foremost education, to show the fucked upness of it, and then the damage that it does, and to show this, like I'm attempting this here, but at the same time giving the person enough freedom and let them feel that they can reproduce that within themselves, that they can internalize this, and then to show another way. And that other way cannot just be a mental way. It cannot use the mind to free the mind. It has to be an holistic way. It has to be something that includes body, emotions, yes, also cognition and mind, but also social aspects and spiritual aspects, and as we know, the energetic aspects of that. And this is what we're up against right now, guys, because if you really want to go into this healing with someone, you are still sort of a fringe dweller if you look at the etheric aspect of this. This is why, I probably could have done 2 different kinds of self-mastery classes here, with etheric abuse being, one in of itself. But it's important to see this in conjunction with another, how it's not just done through indoctrination and emotional abuse and media and so forth. It's also done energetically. And this is the part here that makes this whole thing actually even more interesting than it already is. I want to lead you through the different steps that are needed to identify this, to help another person to identify this, and to educate another person, and to show the harm, and then to show a different way. I think so far the message is coming across, that this is a complex matter, and that we have to. It almost feels redundant, but we have to keep reminding ourselves of certain things, so you will feel this repetition. And that was my concern a little bit in the beginning, which is why, if you guys are okay with this, we can do a 3rd part. Okay.
My opinion, that would be a good idea, the way I feel right now. Of course, this was a shift back into your own power, and it's kind of like the mental stuff right now doesn't feel as good as it did before.
I know, right?
Yeah.
But let me show you what it means to straddle 2 worlds. Okay,
Yeah,
because
I mean,
we've
I
got to
have no
be in
problem
both.
with it. I do it all the time, but
I know but this is exactly what this is about. I mean, we can't use meditation and stuff like that to just meditate things away and to make ourselves feel good for 5 minutes. Okay, this has to go together. It
right.
has to come together. We have to have that clarity to really pierce through this on all levels. So I'm leaning towards a 3rd part, because I personally find your sharings the most important part of self-mastery. So let's see how far we get. At the next 10 minutes, we will be able to walk through more red flags. And this will then also leave enough inspiration for self-reflection in the meantime, till we do the next part. Let's then prepare for the 3rd part as being even more interactive. So here now, we're getting a little more specific, guys. I want to go through the checklist with you, the red flags that you're dealing with a cult or cult-like organization. And last time I spiked your interest in something that you might have or not heard about, the Nexium cult, and the cult leader was sentenced last week to 120 years in prison. And I want to point out for you that this is not only one of the most devious examples and best educational examples for how a cult or cult-like organizations work, because the amount of mind control and manipulation and the surgical precision of it, and the strategic deliberateness of it was unmatched, okay, in that court case. And if you want to know more about it, if you want to compare this to all the things that I have brought forward here as red flags, then you can watch a documentation on HBO. There is a 4-part documentation called The Vow. There is a documentation on Stars called Seduced, and there's a movie called Escaping NXIVM. So they're all about this group that, interestingly enough, and that's why I point this out for you, dealt with self-improvement, had elements of spirituality in there, and is very similar to what we are doing here. And it is something that I find replicated in so many of the so-called teachers or groupings out there that I want to cry, because it is so obvious to me. For anybody who understands these red flags, who is just minimally educated in identifying this, it is obvious. So let me show you what these red flags are. And then we can go into the discussion next time. The red flags, when, you know, of etheric abuse, we'll start with that, and we'll start part 3 with that then. Number 1, is there a hierarchic leadership structure with one indisputable leader on top? That is, you know, a good way of looking at a cult, because they all have that in common. And indisputable meaning that this person is just there because, okay, maybe because he formed the cult, or but it's all around him or her, and there is absolutely, it can't be disputed. They're not elected, they're not voted for, or anything like that. If they mess up, they can't be relieved of their duties. So this is a hallmark of a cult or cult-like organization. Now, any business really that was founded by a person, obviously, derives around that person, but that's different. But it can also be seen in businesses, as we have already discussed. Is his or her background shady? This is something that's easy to really investigate. Okay, typically when you have a cult, these people that form cults, this isn't their first thing. Okay, there is a lot usually that you find if you actually do some research on a person. Also, a hallmark is a tiered structure, typically with an inner circle. And that inner circle is basically sort of the carrot dangle. Okay, it's the red herring. Everybody does everything, anything to become part of this inner circle with special privileges, or, you know, direct contact or anything like that. That's one of the most obvious red flags. Number 2, are there internal checks and balances? Is there any kind of way to, you know, ask questions or to change things? Are there ways to, you know, is this fluid? Is there a development happening, or is this very rigid and no checks and balances? No way to, you know, change the proceedings, the rituals, or whatever is part of this. Are there sneaky or pushy recruitment tactics? Very, very common with cult-like organizations, usually pushy or sneaky. Does it begin with an indoctrination? Is there some kind of like immediate sort of everything that you do or did until here was wrong, and let me break this down. So this brainwashing, as it's often called. Okay, but sneaky recruitment can also, and this we see this a lot with spiritual groups, can happen through virtual signaling, you know, where you're being held to your higher goals. Okay, if you know, if you're not a racist, then you want to do this. Okay, this is a double bind, guys. Okay, it's sneaky, because you might have never asked yourself if you were racist or not, but now you're suddenly in a situation where you were pushed to prove that you are. And of course, the best way for you to prove this is by becoming part of the organization or doing something for them. Is there information control? Are they honest about the agenda? Are they benign? You know, does it feel integrous, or does it feel like, whoa, you know, this is hefty? Okay, there's some things in there that you know, that don't really match up with how I want to interact with other people. But a lot of times, code or code-like organizations aren't really honest about their agenda, and they'll downplay it. They'll make it sound like it's benign. Is there any kind of dependency? Do you have to give personal potential discriminating info? Do you have to give up your belongings or your friends or anything like this? But is there sort of a tactic that puts you into a dependent place? Do you have to pay so much money and they're offering you financing or something like that, that you really have no free choice in the course of participating, whatever it is that they're promising? Is there pressure for higher conformity, hyper conformity? Are there ritualized routines? Again, here also very common in spiritual organizations. I mean, you know, very famous examples are Scientology or aspects of certain Christian sects and cults. I want to be careful with naming any, because you know, I don't want to really run into your cognitive dissonances with certain things. I can tell you from my European perspective, the majority of churches here in the United States would be prosecuted as sects. They would not really be seen as, say, like a branch of the Catholic Church or the Lutheran Church. But again, this can also be part of my indoctrination. Okay, so I want to put this up for discussion rather. Is there, are you being forced to give up personal, potentially discriminating info? Again, this is plays into this having something against you in case you speak up. It's it often starts right at the beginning when you're getting pulled into a cult without you even noticing, you know, like throwing, you know, all your belongings out, or telling them about your deepest secrets and stuff like that. Is there pressure? Oh, is there grandiosity? Is there some kind of mystical anointment of the leader, or you know, the sages or whatever that lead the whole thing? Is there a special or often secret mission? Okay, this is something that should raise a huge red flag in you. Okay, a mystical anointment. Okay, this is this points at the guru status. Okay, that's something that nobody can argue with. Okay, and therefore it's already a double bind, because at the moment you question it, then you're going against the most important cult hive mind, and namely accepting that, you know, whoever the guru is a guru, and that's, you know, something that cannot be proven. Also quite sneaky is a special or secret mission, and that you know, only you are chosen, okay, to know about this. That pulls all strengths of your own specialness. Is self-help, self-improvement, or redemption used as a hook? Redemption, very often, lots of religious organizations use redemption as a hook, that you have to do something to make up for something, and that the only way for you basically to stand in front of your God or whatever the judging authority is when you die, it can be done through participating in this group of chosen people, and so forth. Does being part of this group require you to deny yourself, or you know, your previous life, relationships, or perhaps even life purpose? Are you encouraged to let go of your support structure? Support structure can be anything from family, friends, you know, therapists, coaches, whatnot. But is there some kind of pressure there, where you're being encouraged to let go of all this because it's a dependency, or because they prove to you that it's an attachment that you have, and that's not something that you really need? That's a red flag. Not to say that sometimes it is the case that your family is part of your own sort of brainwashing and your own deception, but discouraging you from being with them, or making you deny them, that's not possible. That's a double bind. Okay. Are you encouraged to live with them? Communes and stuff like that. It's very common, especially with those famous, apocalyptic, doomsday kind of cults. But it's not always that simple. Okay, so living with them can also mean living with another cult member, not necessarily in a commune. Is there a tendency to control your environment that way? Because that's a big part of cults, is that they don't just break you down and reprogram you in that broken state. They also control your environment. This can go as far as neighbors or other church members or whatever, where it's very, very controlled, where you constantly feel observed or videotaped or seen. So you're no longer free to move around or to say things or do things according to your own choice. Are you discouraged, or is it impossible for you to engage in self-care? Well, how could this be impossible? Well, there are a lot of cults out there that have very similar tactics, and that is to keep you so busy with what it is that they want you to do for the cult that you literally run out of time. You barely get any sleep. You don't have enough time to exercise. You can't eat right, and so forth. And some make it even part of the cult, to let go of that and to let go of the body altogether. So you got to be very careful there, because whenever your self-care goes down the drain, or you become even more susceptible to your own self-deceit. You become even more imbalanced in that way. Is there a totalistic ideology? Are there dualistic, oversimplified worldviews, constant judging, labeling, and stereotyping? We talked about this before. Is there this simplistic, us against the world, or, there's the world is all full of demons and ghouls and agents of the matrix, and we are the only ones that can see through this? Or, is this they are the enemy? It's all dark, it's all the devil, and we're the only ones that represent the light. Something like this. This is not that it's wrong, or it's just not true. Okay, so it's oversimplified, and it's labeling, and it often comes with lots of name calling and these stereotyping that is being done in the process of repeating this message over and over again, constantly exposing you to, this simplified view that really makes you see things in that simplified black and white way. Is there a claim to absolute truth? Huge, 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 big red flag. Okay, that's something that if it is an organization that helps or that tries to help people to find truth, okay, then they have to show ways. Okay, but if they claim they have the absolute truth, or their word is the only word, but you are too dumb to get it, okay, and you can just act by it, but you cannot investigate it, that's like a massive red flag. Okay, now some are sneakier than that, and they show you ways, such as Scientology, for instance, but they show you ways that only reconfirm their own bias. Okay, and yet there still is, the claim for absolute truth, and that's something, as most of you already know, cannot be done. Nobody can claim absolute truth, or everybody in that way. Is the pathway limited, unclear, or secret? Can anyone get there? Huge, big one. And this is also part of our epistemological training, okay, to recognize a good teacher. A good teacher shows ways to get there, okay, where he or she is. There is no secret when it comes to, finding yourself or, increasing your consciousness. This isn't a secret. The same with energy work or anything else. Okay, if you're dealing with people that say, oh, only they can do this and they're the only ones that have that technique or have that talent or whatever, run away. Run away. You're not going to learn anything there. You're going to get brainwashed. You're going to get controlled on various degrees. Is there sort of this notion that means justify the goal? You know, that it's okay to minimize values or integrity or even justice or life itself. Does the cult leader or the cult itself or the organization itself present themselves as being above the law, above, you know, sort of what's considered to be, you know, human? Or there apocalyptic overtones? You'll find that a lot, because when there is a sort of this doom and gloom predicted, okay, then people are more likely to be pulled into their pure survival, into their ego instincts and their ego coping, and that's how they become more susceptible. Is there only one way to escape the end of everything? That's also, I mean, you know, if the apocalyptic overtone isn't enough, but right now I can see how people, you know, really see doom and gloom everywhere, because it kind of looks a little bit gloomish. But is there only one way to escape the end of everything? That should raise a red flag in you. And obviously it's their way. Is there frequent blame shifting, spin doctoring, or projecting going on? Now, if you're not familiar with energetic projection, we're going to talk about this in part 3, but it's this like constant sort of, it's their fault. It's them doing this. It's the Illuminati. It's the Bilderbergs. It's Bill Gates. It's like whatnot. Okay, just as examples here that are quite prevalent right now. Chemtrails, 5G, you know, all this like sort of mystified conspiracy theory based blame shifting. Okay, and you have to understand the reason why the mind is so susceptible to it, especially when there is a fear of the future and when there is survival stuff involved, is because none of what we experience today makes sense. And so the mind searches for either fix-it-alls, you know, like shortcuts, like, you know, instant relief, or at least a good reason. And so when things don't make sense, people need that. It's a need. Okay. And this is where cult and cult-like organizations play into. They give you reasons. It's the lazy way of having a scapegoat, you know, and something, someone, whatever, often very mystical, to blame on. Is there a polyamorous tendency? And that refers obviously to the past, because most cult leaders actually did have polyamorous tendencies, meaning they were the only ones who could have sex, or they were the ones that could have multiple wives. It's been in that constellation for the most part that I know of. I'm not aware of any matriarchal type of cult leader who had polyamorous or promoted that. So it's usually one guy who can have multiple women, and the other guys in the cult and the pack, you know, kind of like a wolf pack, you know, can only watch it, but they cannot interact. Sometimes they are allowed to have their own relationships and so forth, but there's a clearly sort of something like a polyamorous tendency overall. Red flag. Okay, you should not be told whom you can have sex with or not, or whom you can have a relationship or not. That is mind control. Are there any signs of physical, emotional, mental abuse of others? So, you know, you might not feel that way yourself yet, but you might observe it, or have an inkling or see it, how other people are being treated. Always watch how other people are being treated. You know, in companies too, always watch how people being treated, you know, because that's what other people take as the normal, as the norm. And with that, then you can expect that one day you're going to be treated that way. That's how simple that is. Are you free to leave? Big question. Okay. Are you free to leave? Whether that is for legal or for whatever reason. Sometimes they make you sign disclaimers. Sometimes they have all kinds of collateral. Sometimes they have things against you, or you have to pay them something back or whatever, and you're not free to leave. And last but not least, this is the most obvious one. Again, you won't experience this until you are in that position, but you can observe it. Is there harassment, blackmailing, litigation, or smear campaigning of ex-members? If you see that happening in an organization, then you know you're not free to leave, and there is a severe punishment. So that creates a huge sort of influencing of your choice, of your free will. All right, guys, so let's close here. We're going to dive deep into etheric abuse, how this feels, and then the self-healing strategies. I'm glad that you were able to experience a little bit of your heart and your energy here in the midst of all this intellectual, this mental learning. I want to thank you for having this attention span, which isn't normal anymore nowadays, and for expressing your interest, for contributing, obviously, and for showing up for something like this that really requires us to step out of our own comfort zone and reflect back on, yeah, like sometimes we do this too. Sometimes we do manipulate people, sometimes we do gaslight people. But let me assure you that there is a science to that. There is really mechanics of the self-deception that our mind does. And for the most part, unless you want to be, an evil person, a dark person, which, only very few people actually do have that intention. Most people want to be good people. Okay, then, you can't detect that. And that's why education is so important. And I can tell you for the next years to come, we'll see a drastic increase on cults and fanaticism all around the world, not just in the spiritual also. I mean, there in particular, I've predicted this for many years, you know this, but also in regards to political and other kind of, especially company cults. We're going to actually see company nations here in a few years. This is something that you can't imagine right now, but this is all already in the pipeline. So more than ever, it's important to learn to discern, and this empowers you as healers and self-healers, as professionals, to help other people to break free. And I'm incredibly honored that you trust in me, all right, to provide you with these ways, or with, the mechanics of how to break through all of this. Thank you for this. And I'm looking forward to part 3 of etheric abuse and mind control with you. Awesome. Bye bye, everyone.